Tonight, there are growing signs that Israel could be on the brink of launching a full-scale ground invasion of Gaza. Israel's military says it's expanding its ground operations there, and it has launched a massive aerial bombardment targeting the terrorist group Hamas.
As night fell over Gaza, Israel stepped up its bombing campaign again. Israel aims to degrade the military capabilities Hamas has to the greatest degree possible. In the last few hours, we increased the strikes in Gaza. The Air Force is striking underground terrorist facilities and terrorist facilities in a very significant way. Following the series of strikes of the last few days, the ground forces are extending the ground operation tonight. Israel has steadily been increasing its incursions into Gaza, using mobile units with tanks supported by jets and drones. A steady stream of attacks before an expected full-scale invasion. And a warning from Israel on Friday. It accuses Hamas of using Gaza's largest medical complex, the Al-Shifa hospital, as their military operational headquarters.
When medical facilities are used for terror purposes, they are liable to lose the protection from attack in accordance with international law.
The challenge Israel faces. Al-Shifa hospital has become a refuge from the bombing for tens of thousands of Palestinians. An appeal by Israel's allies.
The United States has made clear in both public and private conversations that as Israel exercises its right, and indeed its responsibility, to defend its people against the terrorist group, it must do so in line with the rules of war. There are no law-free zones in war.
Israel has not yet succeeded in stopping Hamas firing rockets over the border from Gaza. The militant group says it fired a number of salvos on Friday. Rockets like this one, which hit a residential building in Tel Aviv, wounding several Israelis. A reminder that the terrorist threat from Hamas is still very much alive.
Well, journalist Sami Sockol is following this story in Jerusalem. He has more on the Israeli military's expanding operations tonight.
Yeah, so not only have they said that they're expanding the ground operations, but we have now reports from the ground, from the north of the Gaza Strip, that Israeli tanks are rolling into the Gaza Strip, and there is also Hamas fighters there that are confronting them. So this is like the most recent development. Earlier this evening, there was a bombarding of the Gaza Strip. People in the Gaza Strip are saying that this has been the worst bombardment since the beginning of the Israeli campaign. Israel has been both from the air, artillery, and from the sea. The extent of this bombing is that Israeli residents who live in communities outside the Gaza Strip have been reporting that their houses have been shaking and some of the windows have been shattered as a result of this bombardment that is taking place in the Gaza Strip. We also know that these strikes hit Jawal, which is the leading Palestinian telecommunications company. It hit their facility, and now in the Gaza Strip, there's no internet, and the situation, of course, is very grave.
And Sami, I just want to make sure that we can confirm that you're saying that the Israeli military is saying that its forces are encountering Hamas militants inside Gaza. So this is the urban warfare that we've been warned about, correct?
Well, we still don't know the scope of this. We still don't know whether it's similar to what we've seen in previous evenings or whether this is something of a larger scale. But there are Israeli tanks now in the northern Gaza Strip.
And what can you tell us about claims by the Israel Defense Forces that the Al-Shifa hospital is being used by Hamas militants inside Gaza?
Yeah, well, today the IDF spokesperson spoke to a foreign media and told them that the Hamas headquarters the military headquarters are under the Shifa hospital. That Shifa hospital is being used by Hamas fighters, that there are tunnels that are leading and connecting between and under the hospital to the network of Hamas tunnels in the Gaza Strip. I mean, of course, Hamas has denied it. They issued a statement in which they deny this. And clearly, by making these kinds of statements, Israel is signaling to the world that regarding this hospital as a legitimate target.
Yeah, and we have to remind our viewers, we cannot verify these claims that are being made by the military, but if it is true, it does fall in line with what we've been hearing from Israel all along, that Hamas uses civilian areas as human shields, right?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of argument is something that we've heard over the years, but you have to remember that the Gaza Strip is a very crowded area. 2.3 million people are living in the Gaza Strip, and clearly the Hamas fighters are located in the Gaza Strip. I would also say that in Israel, you have also military facilities and military presence in civilian areas. So this is not something which is unique to Hamas, but this is a point that Israel has been raising again and again to justify the kind of campaign that it's waging against the leaders and commanders of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and explaining why there have been so many civilian casualties throughout this air campaign.
Journalist Sami Sockol with the latest developments tonight from Jerusalem. Sami, thank you. Well, our coverage continues now with Frank Ledwidge. He's a senior lecturer in strategic studies at Portsmouth University. He's also a former UK military intelligence officer, and he joins us tonight from Oxford. Frank, it's good to see you again. Let's talk about where we are right now. Israel's defense forces say that they are expanding their operations tonight. Do you think that this is the beginning of that much anticipated ground invasion?
There are three indications, Brent, that would indicate that it is the beginning of a military operation, and I'll come back to that in a second. First is the communications blackout, which will include electronic warfare to deny Hamas communications. So we've seen that for the last few hours, and we'll see that go on. And that will include cyber attacks as well as taking down of radio towers. The second indication is a huge bombardment, and we really are talking about something considerable here. Bombs are being dropped at a rate of about heavy bombs every 10 seconds. And finally, there's the announcement of the Israeli Defense Forces. Plus, and I saw this as well, the Israeli press is picking up that Palestinians are saying that Israeli tanks are conducting at least a raid in force. However, the US are advising the IDF very strongly. They have a very senior general in the Israeli headquarters advising them not to conduct huge or large-scale operations, but rather to conduct what we would call pulsing operations, which is to say large-scale raids, withdraw, large-scale raids to achieve objectives, withdraw. I suspect that's what we're going to see over the next few weeks. If we don't, they will know that they're not taking US advice.
The IDF says that the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza is being used by Hamas militants as their main headquarters for military operations. I mean, they also say that Hamas is using civilians as human shields. Now, considering this, knowing that if you move into Gaza, you're talking about urban warfare, is there any way that the Israeli military, even if they destroy Hamas, that they can win this battle, because there's going to be so many civilian lives that will be lost?
Well, I've no doubt at all that the IDF is accurate on this. Not for nothing is Hamas called a terrorist organization. We saw the measure of them 3 weeks ago. The main weapon against the Israeli Defense Forces, of course, civilians. And the IDF is more than aware of that, I think. But also, it's fair to say the military center of gravity of this operation, at least on Hamas's part, are the tunnel system. And the Israelis have plans for that. They haven't just discovered now that the headquarters of Hamas, if they are there, are underneath that hospital. That's something they'll be aware of for a long time, and they will have planned for that. I seriously doubt whether they're planning to take down their hospital. That would probably be disproportionate under international law and would, of course, present them with political problems as well. They've got plans for it, for sure.
Egyptian officials are saying that unidentified drones hit 2 Egyptian Red Sea towns on Friday. We've got Israel accusing Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels having the intention of harming Israel. What can you tell us about this, Frank?
Last week, an American destroyer, the USS Carney, shot down, I think, several dozen, tens of drones that seemed to have been fired from Yemen and were aimed towards Israel. Another drone fell on Taba, I think, yesterday, which is near the border. The Israeli Air Force today reported that it had engaged drones that it said it wasn't convinced it knew where they came from, but the heavy hints that it was Yemen again. And I suspect that the drones that crashed on Egyptian territory today were being fired from Yemen.
Military analyst Frank Ledwidge joining us tonight from Oxford. Frank, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent.
Well, meanwhile, the situation for the more than 2 million people trapped inside Gaza, it is growing worse by the hour. Just a trickle of humanitarian aid has been arriving, and supplies of food, fuel, and water have nearly run out.
In the Gaza Strip, the relentless bombing continues from the air and from the sea. Amid dire warnings that the trickle of aid that is getting in is nowhere near enough.
Basic services are crumbling, medicine is running out, food and water are running out, the streets of Gaza have started overflowing with sewage. Gaza is on the brink of a massive health hazard, at the risk of diseases are looming.
All of this is made worse by the fuel shortages. Around 200,000 people in shelters receive fresh bread from the World Food Programme every day, and the few bakeries that are still open are producing a fraction of what they were before the crisis began. With no other options, this woman has resorted to using whatever paper she can find as fuel to bake bread on the streets.
We've gone to get flour under bombardment from a besieged area, and we've brought firewood from the streets, and we're risking our lives looking for paper.
Fresh water is also in short supply. Many in Gaza are now queuing up with bottles and canisters, unsure when the next delivery might make it through. Gaza health authorities warn that the hospitals are at breaking point, lacking medicine and fuel to carry out essential operations. The humanitarian situation on the ground is looking increasingly bleak. This woman, unable to breastfeed her baby and lacking access to milk, fears the worst.
My son's skin is gradually turning yellow due to the lack of breastfeeding. What has he done wrong? What has this baby done wrong?
This man mourns the death of his wife and 8-month-old baby. Both were killed in an Israeli airstrike. Despite earlier Israeli assurances that southern Gaza would be spared, it seems nowhere is safe in the Strip, and fears about escalation will only be exacerbated by the sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis.
Well, the UN says that it will be forced to halt its operations in Gaza if fuel is not allowed into the territory. Samah Hadid from the Norwegian Refugee Council told us earlier what this would mean for the more than 2 million Gazans in need.
It means an absolute catastrophe for over 2 million people in Gaza, because food is running out, water is running out, and medicine is running out. And the aid that has come through is just not enough. It's nowhere near enough. And fuel is not being allowed to be delivered into Gaza. Hospitals need fuel to keep operating. Water pumps require fuel. Bakeries require fuel. So it's an absolute catastrophic situation. And the events tonight in Gaza are terrifying. Gaza right now is under a full communications blackout. And with the announcement that the Israeli government has launched a ground operation, we fear for the worst.
Yeah, Ms. Hadid, I just want to be clear. Are you saying that your organization is also going to have to halt its operations in Gaza?
Well, we've had to scale down our operations because of the bombardment and the lack of safety for our colleagues on the ground. We've continued to deliver cash assistance to support civilians and families, to buy basic food items and other items on the market. But the aid relief is nowhere near enough to meet the growing needs on the ground. I mean, we need an urgent scale up of aid. All crossings need to be opened, and the Israeli government has to lift its siege off of Gaza.
And what about the situation in terms of medical care? We know there are reports that many, about a third, if not more, of the hospitals in Gaza have basically shut down. Are things improving as aid slowly begins to trickle into the territory? I think there was a report that, 10 European doctors have arrived.
The medical equipment and supplies that are coming through are simply not enough. And hospitals right now need fuel. They need fuel and electricity to keep running so that they can treat people with the right medical supplies and care. And this is just not happening right now. And with this escalation in violence, with Israeli ground operation being launched into Gaza, we will see widespread civilian bloodshed and even more destruction to civilian infrastructure. So our plea to the international community is to end this horrific suffering, call for a ceasefire. Enough is enough. Whilst this catastrophe is unfolding in Gaza, world leaders are still debating over a ceasefire at the United Nations. It's simply not good enough, and they must step up their efforts.
Ms. Hadid, I want to ask you what you've been hearing from your people on the ground in Gaza. You know that the Israeli military says that Hamas is using at least one hospital as its headquarters, where civilians, where patients are also being housed. Can they confirm claims like that? Have your people encountered Hamas militants on the ground?
These claims cannot be confirmed. And what we've seen over the past few weeks is indiscriminate Israeli bombardment over Gaza that has hit civilian infrastructure, has led to civilian casualties on a widespread scale. Thousands of children have lost their lives under Israeli bombardment. So we need the international community to really focus on ending this suffering and preventing further bloodshed. They really do need to step up and call for a ceasefire.
Samah Hadid from the Norwegian Refugee Council, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.